Hey everyone, welcome back to the channel and another episode of What's That Croc. In the first episode of What's That Croc, which was episode 36 on Croc Chat, I went over the differences between a Moralett's crocodile and the American crocodile. So today I want to continue with two more species of crocodiles found here in the Americas, as well as chat about the anatomical characteristics that we use when making these more specific IDs. So don't go anywhere. I'm Mark Perpetua, and you're watching Croc Chat. I'm going to use this skull right here from a young Nile crocodile to point out some of the physical or anatomical characteristics that you're going to hear us talk about when we're describing what to look for when you want to identify certain species of crocodilians. For one, if you go back and you check out the first episode of What's That Croc, that was again episode 36 on Croc Chat, you're going to hear me use the term cranial table. That is right here between the orbits or between the eye sockets all the way back to the back of the skull, otherwise known as the cranium. And this can either sit very high on the head, allowing the eyes to sit deeper into the sockets, or it's going to sit very low on the head, and then the eyes will pop up higher and look like they're sitting on top of the head. So cranial table is one of the references we'll make. The eye sockets themselves are called orbits. So you'll hear me talk about a preorbital hump on the American crocodile in that episode. So right in front of the orbits, before, a preorbital hump forms on the American crocodile skull as they get older and bigger, and that's one of the distinguishing features. This one has a more gentle slope, not a true hump like the American crocodile would have. And then lastly, on the skull, we'll take a look at right here behind the eyes. This upper ridge on the skull is what's called the squamosal bone. So we'll often refer to the squamosals because there's two of them. That's why it's plural, one on each side, left and right. And the squamosals can be seen when the crocodile is alive and when the crocodile is moving about, because they appear as the top ridge of the ear. And obviously you can see the ear canal right here under the squamosal bone. Some crocodilians, like the Cuban crocodile, develop really large squamosals as they get bigger and older. And those big squamosals will sit up higher than the top of the eyelid, almost giving them a horned-like appearance. And that is a classic characteristic to look for, not only on the Cuban crocodile, but also other species that we'll talk about later on in other episodes of this series. One more thing to point out is this area right here is called the occipital condyle, and right here is a foramen or a hole through which the spinal cord will go in and attach to the brain. This area here is only being mentioned because the occipital region is the region behind the back of the skull. And we're going to see in a few seconds when we look at a live crocodile that the first set of scales behind the skull are referred to as post-occipital scales behind the occipital region. Now we're going to take a look at a live crocodile. This is a little Moralett's crocodile, and of course, a live crocodile is what you'll be looking at if you're trying to make these IDs. Now, if we take a look at his head first, I want to point out a couple of things we already talked about. The low cranial table. That's easily noticed on this little guy because you can see just in front of his eyes how low his snout already is, and those eyes sit way up on top of the head. You can also see a low cranial table just in its squamosals. We mentioned squamosal bones as the upper edge of the ear. And you can see in the morelettes, they sit low with the cranial table. And they're also not as pronounced as we mentioned they might be on a larger, older Cuban crocodile. Also, want to point out some of the scales. If we look at the neck, now remember, we're talking about the genus Crocodilus right now, the true crocodile. And what we're normally going to see are just behind the base of the skull. Remember, that was the occipital region. So these are called post-occipitals. And these scutes usually occur in two pairs, two to the left, two to the right, and therefore is a total of four. I say usually. We're going to find out in another video someday that the saltwater crocodile doesn't have post-occipitals. Also, the size of the post-occipitals will be another indication that we can use to look for on, again, what species it is. So we'll talk about post-occipital scales at some point, and then we have behind the post-occipitals the nuchal scutes. Nuchal scutes are the scutes on the neck. Nuchal typically means back of the neck or top of the neck. And what we see here is an arrangement in the crocodilus of 4 and 2. Sometimes they're referred to as a nuchal cluster because they're grouped together. But again, usually 4 first, followed by 2 in the genus Crocodilus. So our little Morellette's crocodile is following that pattern, as do all of the crocodiles that are found in the Americas. Again, the size and positioning of these scutes are going to be useful in some of our other videos when pointing out the species ID characteristics to look for. Lastly, we could just talk about the flanks as well. Flanks are along the side of the body, arrangement of scales in nice, neat rows, and the size of the scales along the flanks are still one more characteristic we'll eventually be using, again, in trying to figure out what's that croc.
CrocChat is sponsored by rodentpro.com. Not only do they supply me with the quality feeders for all my reptiles, they are offering you a 10% discount for being a supporter of CrocChat. Use the code CrocChat10 with your next Rodent Pro order.
This is an American crocodile. This video was somewhere near Miami. But as we stated in our first What's That Croc video, the American crocodile can range all the way to the northern part of South America. Another crocodile in South America is the Orinoco crocodile. The Orinoco crocodile is a critically endangered species found only in the Orinoco River Basin in Venezuela and Colombia. Now, they can look very similar to American crocodiles and even have the same scattered scutes along the flanks. However, one of the characteristics that sets an Orinoco crocodile apart is its long, slender snout. These are crocodiles with a very skinny nose by comparison to the American crocodile. You'll also notice that they do not have the preorbital hump. Another characteristic we'll notice is their color. While some American crocs will be similar, all Orinocos appear to be this bright golden, yellow, or bronze type of color with dark chocolate markings. Also, take a look at the nuchal cluster. Again, there's that 4-2 arrangement of the nuchal scutes, but they are very large and broad, and the entire cluster looks like a giant shield on the back of the neck of the Orinoco crocodile. It's also important to mention that the Orinoco crocodile is a large crocodile. These guys can grow to well over 16 feet in length, and some have even approached 20 feet long.
CrocChat is the official channel for the Crocodilian Conservation Project. And now we also have a merch store. Go check out the Gator Gear store, either through my website, reptileprograms.com, or you can find the link in the description for this video. A portion of every sale will go towards saving endangered crocodilians.
The last species of crocodile found in the Western Hemisphere is the Cuban crocodile. Cuban crocodiles are another critically endangered species, and they're found only in the Zapata Swamp and the Isle of Youth of Cuba. These are not the biggest crocodiles and average just over 10 feet in length. But what they lack in size, they make up for with the ability to gallop over land and using their strong legs to leap at prey in low-lying trees. Now, to identify a Cuban crocodile is fairly easy. For one, they have those huge squamosal bones. Just look behind the eyes and you'll see these big, prominent bones above the ear. They also have, at least to me, a more of a cylinder or cone-shaped nose, meaning the breadth of the nose across the top of the snout is very rounded instead of flat. You'll also notice Cuban crocodiles are very colorful crocodiles with beautiful dark chocolate colors along the top and then flecked in with smaller scales that are pale yellow to almost golden in color. If you also look along the flanks, you'll see that their scutes form sort of a pebble-like appearance, making the Cuban crocodile one of the more easily recognizable species to identify. Okay, so let's put it to the test. And these are going to be easy ones. Just look at that color, the large nuchal scutes, and the shape of the nose. This is easily identifiable as the Orinoco crocodile. And this picture here is one of my favorites. Just look at the color of this individual and those high squamosal bones. This one is easily identifiable as a Cuban crocodile. So I'll add a picture of the Moralettes crocodile just to complete the crocodiles of the Americas. Make sure to stay tuned for our next episode of What's That Croc and more podcast interviews with crocodilian experts coming soon. Thanks again for watching. Till next time, later, Gator.